Hello, welcome to EverydayHDR.com. I am Blake Rudis, and today's tutorial is going to be focused on Topaz Black and White Effects 2. I recently had the pleasure of experimenting with the beta, and I'm really glad to see that it's been released to the public. It's a great program, and if you haven't used it, download the trial and give it a shot. If you have downloaded it, you'll find Topaz Black and White Effects as well as other Topaz Labs products under Filter, and then go down to Topaz Labs. We're going to click on Black and White Effects 2. Now, it's a great idea to have some type of black and white conversion software built into whatever it is that you post-process with. Lightroom does a great job with black and white photos. Photoshop does a great job converting black and white photos, and Camera Raw also. But with all those, there's kind of a learning curve, and you kind of have to know what you're doing to get a great black and white photo, I should say. Now, with a program like Black and White Effects 2, you have an all-inclusive, all expenses paid getaway to a black and white world where you can do just about anything you want with black and white photography. What I really like that Topaz Labs has done in this new version of Black and White Effects is they've streamlined and made the interface absolutely gorgeous and really easy to navigate. You know, the icons, they're self-explanatory. You know what you're getting when you click on them. And what I really enjoy is if you go over here on the left and go to these presets, there's tons of presets here. It takes a little bit of time for the previews to load, like you're seeing here, but I don't find that a problem. Coming up here, you'll see why. When you click on the preview, you get a very large preview, and it's really smooth. Once you get that initial wait time over, you can see what's going to happen to that photograph right away. I really like that as a great addition. Now, in traditional black and white photography, back in the old film days, filters were a great asset to have in your kit. A red filter would help accentuate skies. There was also orange filters, yellow filters. These filters have already been pre-built right into Black and White Effects 2, which is great. Great addition. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this and just we're going to just experiment here. Now, I'm not going to go through every single tab because you don't really need me to. You can click on these question marks that will give you help for every adjustment that's right here in Black and White Effects 2. So there's no real sense in me clicking on each and every one. I'm saying, well, contrast will do this to your photograph, because, you know, it's kind of self-explanatory. But I will go through and show a bunch of the highlights that I think are really great with this Black and White Effects. So I like to just jump into my photograph and just start experimenting. You know, some people think that there's some rhyme or reason to it and that you can just, you know every slider, you know what you're doing, but it doesn't work that way. You need to experiment. So with every one of these adjustments here, you're going to have to click on the checkbox to make sure that it's working. So if I adjust the contrast to this and then uncheck the checkbox, it's telling me that this is no longer being applied to the image. So the box is applied, otherwise what you're doing will not work. So in a black and white photograph, for me personally, unless it's a really stylized black and white photograph, I like to see the stars of the show shine through. And the stars of a black and white photograph are exactly that. They are black and white. And therefore there should be some black or a lot of black, or some white or a lot of white. But an all intermediate gray photograph to me is not true black and white. What I like here is that you have this basic exposure panel here, and you can boost the blacks and you can boost the whites individually. Now, they work very quickly, so be very careful with this. My one gripe during the beta test was that these moved even faster. So a very slight adjustment would go a very long way. They've fixed that since then. But just be careful with them. A slight movement to the right will give you a giant increase in your blacks or your whites. Contrast and brightness, those are you know, typical, and no sense really going over those. Adaptive exposure, this is nice, and you know the great thing about this is that you can click on any one of these question marks and it's going to go ahead and explain to you what it is that's happening to your photograph. And these are kind of like a high dynamic range adjustments built right here into black and white effects. So if you look at the adaptive exposure, it's based on the amount of regions in that photograph. If you divide the photograph into a number of regions, that's how much is being affected. So the lower the regions, the less the effect. The higher the regions, the more the effect. I don't like to go this high with it because you start to get a flat image because everything becomes in such high detail. So I don't typically like to move that too high. But in the process of doing so, you have the ability to protect those highlights and those shadows from being destroyed during the adaptive exposure. You can boost the detail here if you'd like to. We'll go ahead and close that one. Give it a little bit of adaptive exposure, maybe a little less than that. And that works for me. Okay, a little bit, just to give it a little punch. Now, color sensitivity. If you have color sensitivity selected, and you start moving around these adjustments, it's going to boost the reds that were in the initial image to begin with. So if you know those areas that were red, like these leaves were a reddish color, they're going to change as I move the adjustment slider to the left or to the right to kind of accent that original color. I'm going to come back to color sensitivity because there's something really important with that later on. You can add color filters to your photograph as well. We discussed that before by clicking on these buttons. It basically does the same thing. But you can be more selective about the filter that you're putting on. It'd basically be like a filter that you're putting on in front of the lens before you take the picture. Great addition here. I love seeing a curves adjustment tool built right into programs because you can just boost that S curve and get that nice contrast adjustment right there. There are a bunch of creative effects in here as well. They've kind of built in a simplified, diffusion, posterize, camera shake. You can do some of these creative effects if you'd like. I'm not too huge of a fan at this point for this photograph. I believe they have a time and a place, and for this photograph it probably won't work too well. I do like diffusion, however. I like how you can kind of make this a soft, pleasant image to look at by using diffusion. And then, as usual, you can get some local adjustments in here. You can dodge and burn. Always a great addition to have in here. Now, the finishing touches, this is where it gets kind of fun. You can tone the paper, which I think is great. By toning the paper, this goes back to the old traditional black and white photo days where you could add a sepia tone to an image by using color tones in that in the chemical baths. And it's really quite simple. You know, you move the adjustment, what you see is what you get. I like it. I think it's pretty neat. Now, these kind of work, if you look at the paper hue is going to shine through in your white areas. So let's go ahead and boost the paper tone strength. Anywhere there was a white area, that's the area where the paper is going to show through. So this is kind of like a split toning with your shadows and your highlights. So just keep that in mind as you experiment with the silver tone of the paper. You can quad tone it as well. We'll just leave that silver tone in there, kind of like that. You can add film grain specific to old films, which I think is great. I never did too much experimentation with a lot of old film, mainly Kodak is what I used. But it's nice that you can add that film grain into there and get that old traditional film look. You can add a border into it too, which goes great with film grain, and you can adjust that border size by moving it back and forth. Pretty interesting. Go ahead and check that off. Now, edge exposure. I like this one. Edge exposure, you can actually change just the edge of a photograph. So you can add a little bit more exposure to the edge, the bottom edge, the top edge, the left edge, right edge, what have you, which can make for a really nice box vignette if you do all of them individually. Now, if you go too far with it, like you saw here, that's a little too much. And then if you go even farther on the edge size here, that's just way too much. So again, another one of those that you just kind of want to use very sparingly and just barely have that edge just creep up over the sides. One of the really cool ones that vignettes, they're pretty self-explanatory as usual. You know, if you've ever adjusted any vignettes in any other program, there is very much the same. You move it to the left, you're going to get that black vignette. Move it to the right, you're going to get the white vignette. I do like vignetting too. I'm a fan of vignetting. I don't care what anybody says. My favorite edition is this transparency edition. Now, I told you I was going to go back to the color sensitivity, and this is where I'm going to go back to the color sensitivity. The overall transparency is going to affect the, this is where it doesn't explain it very well here in black and white effects, but it says here that transparency brings back a percentage of the original image, blending it with the chosen adjustments. It doesn't really tell you what the chosen adjustments are, so I'm going to go back and give you a little fill-in on that. This is a great tool for hand coloring black and white images. So if we move the transparency all the way up and then go back to conversion and go to color sensitivity, turn the color sensitivity on, and we manipulate all of these sliders for all the colors, this is where the transparency is coming in. Whatever you have selected here on these color adjustments are the colors that are going to show through in that overall transparency below. So if you want selective colors to come through, you're going to want to go to the color sensitivity after selecting the transparency and adjust those accordingly. So if we go back down to the finishing touches and go to transparency and move that transparency down, you can get some really cool, creative, selective color, but not obvious selective color. I mean, there's somewhere, you know, like a bouquet of flowers is bright red and the rest of the image is black and white. You know, it's overused and it's overdone. I think with this one you have a little bit more, I don't want to say control, but you can just make it have a different style and a different look to it, which I do enjoy. So if all of them are set back to 0, you're going to get kind of just a dull black and white image, but then you can go in accordingly and adjust what colors you want to shine through that transparency. Now, as usual, if you want to save this preset, I kind of like this look. It's got this like dark, mysterious, I'm a rock look to it, so let's go ahead and save that. If you want to save this preset, you can save it, created by me, Blake Rudis, and it's good for, let's just say nature and landscape. How about that? And we're going to say color, transparency, cool. And then I'm going to save it in my collection. So if I ever go back to the presets up here and go to my collection, that preset will always be saved as cool trans color. I've done a couple other presets that I really enjoy here. So that's Topaz black and white effects in a nutshell. There's tons more things that you can do here. If you want to see your previews, you can always, it's going to revert back to just a black and white image, a straight black and white image. So don't expect to see your original color image in here because it's going to like a desaturated black and white image. Another cool tool here before we go ahead and break away is this inspect mode. Anywhere you place your trigger when you're in inspect mode, it's going to show inside the loop here what it is that you're clicking on. So if you want to see in depth like what's going on with that leaf, yeah, leaf is kind of blurry there. What's going on with that leaf color? You can really get right in there and zoom right in. You can also zoom in using the zoom tools as well, but sometimes it's nice to just have that quick access loop right there. So this is Topaz Black and White Effects 2. My name is Blake Rudis, and this is Everyday HDR. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I highly encourage you to find Topaz Black and White Effects on their website. Give it a shot, give it a download. It's well worth it. Have a great weekend, everyone.